When I was in the college seminary, I had a wonderful teacher of English, and we studied many plays, and one of them was Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. If you've never seen this play, it's a must, and they have it on film also. Very wonderful, very funny, and it's a play that he was attacking the noble class in England. You know, the people that had all the money, all the titles, and were very stuffy and had all kinds of rules and all kinds of, well, you know, you must do it this way, and this is the proper way, all of that kind of talk. So, in this play, there's this scene. Lady Bracknell is a particularly haughty person, and she's got a daughter, Gwendolen, and Gwendolen decides for herself that she's going to get engaged. In this time in England, I don't think so. So she announces to her mother, Lady Bracknell, the most proper of the most proper of people, and says to her, "Mother, I am going to be engaged to this person, Ernest." And so Lady Bracknell, this is what she says. "Pardon me? You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself." Well, there you have it. Lady Bracknell said, "We'll decide who you are marrying." Now, this was my first introduction in a real sense to arranged marriages. But over the years, I've met many people. For example, a lot of India still has arranged marriages. I know somebody just 2 years ago who came over here, this girl, and she went through college here. She got her degree. She was very good person in technology and was doing very well, but she was going to get married, and her parents had arranged the marriage. So we couldn't believe this. Really? In 2018? Really? And she said, "Yeah, that's how we do it." And as we discussed it further, somebody said, "Well, you know, how can that work?" She said, "Well, actually, statistically, I think you'll find that more arranged marriages last than ones where the children decide for themselves." And so, having more conversation, she explained that in India, where in Asia, the same is true, people marry and they say, "Okay, we're going to bring these two people together," and oftentimes it has to do with families, sometimes with nobility, sometimes with advancing their lives and their fortunes, everything. But they say when you get married, it's not because you feel like you're in love, but you decide you will love. It's not an adjective or a noun, it's a verb that you promise to love this person. And so you grow in all these ways of dedication and trust and respect. You work hard to build it. Kind of what Lady Bracknell says, this is, wait, deciding who you marry, this is too delicate an issue for children to make. You have to have some wisdom and knowledge and look at life. So we adults will decide who you're going to marry. Like it or not, that's how it exists, okay? Now, the other piece that this brings to mind for me is on this Feast of Holy Family. You know, I'm a priest, so we don't get married. I've never had a wife. I don't have children. I came from a reasonably large family. There were 8 of us using one bathroom. I consider that a challenge. 8 of us in one bathroom, both my parents, 13 brothers and sisters. So I know what family is about, but I never made a family. And I never formed the family. And quite frankly, I'm always amazed at you. When I talk about all this stuff, I can't believe I don't see eyes rolling like, "Oh, please, Father, you don't know what a family is. How do you know?" And that's fair enough. Fair enough. I can only speak of my experience and 42 years listening to you all complain about families. And let's face it, nobody can love you like a family, and nobody can make your life more miserable than the family. It's both and. It's quite a mixture. Family is truly the basis of all society, but boy, family can do some real numbers on people. And one of the things I discovered as I got older and older, especially my last parish, because it was so huge, I did so much counseling and listening to people and their problems. And what I really began to discover was the damage that happens to so many I'm going to say the first 10 to 15 years. For example, like divorce. No judgment here, no judgment. But when I was born in 1950, and I had one aunt, the sister of my father, who was, when I came into the world, already divorced. Marriage didn't last long at all. He beat her just once. That was it. And it was over. When I was about 15, his brother divorced. And I remembered that one because in the 50s, in the early 60s, there was practically no divorce. Even civilly, it was very difficult to get one. Now you don't have to show up for the court. You just hand in the papers. It's done. And in the church, it was almost impossible to divorce and remarry, but things have changed. In fact, as I tell every couple that comes to see me to get married, I say, I'm going to pour everything I can to this. I want to challenge you a lot because this is not an easy life you're entering into. Mine is a cinch compared to you, what you have to do. And 1 out of 2 marriages don't make it. Statistics are awful. And when I look at families when I was young, especially let's go back to rural families, that communities were tight. But now, I mean, how many children have two sets of parents? You know, it's really difficult. And what happens to them when they're young and these things happen? It's excruciating. And worst of all, so many of them tuck it down, push it in, keep it down in there, and it bursts out at 25 or 30 in addiction or something else. Painful lives because they've been hurt so much. And much of it not intended. Nobody set out to do it. I'm reading a book right now. I never thought I would read one of these ever. I think it's called The 7 Best Habits of a Successful Person. I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I'm reading this. But it is amazing. And this morning, as I got up, I get up at 6 every morning. I read for about 45 minutes. And I'm reading this on listening. Oh my God. I had to challenge myself. Do I really listen? Do I really listen? I mean, listen not as I'm listening, already preparing my answer. Listening. It's kind of a challenge. And the nice thing about this book, it lays it out in a way that it's almost like a manual, what you do and what you don't do. So people come to me, they're going to start their family as they get married, or they're way into their family and they have problems, or whatever along the way. Today we celebrate this Feast of Holy Family, and it's kind of sad, really, that we once a year look at this. Everybody. We're all talking about the Holy Family and families. So I have come to the conclusion, I've mentioned it earlier in the year, but I'm saying it again so that people will get a doll of me and then stick pins in it. If I don't do what I said I'm going to do, I want you to come after me. I intend to do a retreat this year that I'll do. It'll be a continual one on domestic churches. And the concept is this. It's an old concept in the church. Everybody here, your family is a domestic church. Your household is a domestic church. If you, like Jay, is in a family, he's in a domestic church, this family, but he's not a member in a formal way in the bigger church. So today, he's growing up in this family. He's been introduced to this family, and he will be considered Roman Catholic Christian. But this little church is where he'll get most of his foundation, 98%. He'll learn to say prayers there. He'll learn to make the sign of the cross there. He'll hear about God there. He'll be introduced to an altar there with the statues and Mary and Jesus and the cross. And long before, Jay, are you hearing me about the cross? Yeah, kind of funny, huh? Hasn't a clue what I just said. Hasn't a clue. But he'll have a clue here. And long before he receives his first communion, he'll grow up in this domestic church. And I say to myself, Perry Leiker, what are you and other priests and bishops and popes doing to guide these domestic churches? Do we have any tools? We heard some in the scripture. Hannah dedicates her son to the Lord, leaves him at the temple, or that's the language. She hands him over to God. He's yours, God. We hear in the second reading all this stuff about loving and living God's commandments so that we can live an integrated, whole, and holy life. And then we hear this gospel, and it's the only story in all of the Gospels of Jesus other than his birth and when he's an adult in ministry. It's one story. And Luke, I think, has great purpose in this. He wants to declare for us, the reader, that Jesus acknowledges his Father in heaven as the primary connection and source of all in his life, and then his family. God first. Like the Latinos say, primero Dios. All right, the God first. But in this story, it happens in a typical kind of a painful family crisis. And I say crisis because there isn't a parent here who wouldn't go into crisis mode if you were traveling and you had big family gatherings somewhere. Maybe it was a big family reunion, and you got back on the road, and a day later you're convinced that your 12-year-old son or daughter is with family, and then you're passing the word around because you have a question for him and nobody knows where he is. What? Crisis mode. And then you decide, we got to go back to where we were. 3 days later, they find him in the temple. And he hasn't a clue that he's caused any problem. In fact, when they say, Jesus, hello, don't you know that you've caused us great anxiety? Where have you been? Why didn't you tell us? Why did you do this to us? And he says, What? What's the problem? Didn't you know I had to be about my Father's business? It's kind of an odd little story on one level, but a beautiful one too, because it's in this story and in this crisis that he presents to his mother and father Joseph who he is and what he has to do. And then perhaps the most delicious line in the story says, Mary kept all these things in her heart. Maybe that's a lot of the problem of family, that we don't get things down to the heart level very often. Maybe there's a lot of arguing, even spousal arguing in the head. Well, it should be this way. No, it's this way. I'm right. You're wrong. You're wrong. But when we bring it down to the heart and when we let God into the mix, God, what should I do? God, how can I forgive? God, how should I be in relationship to this person? God, how do I have to change? Then maybe there at the level of heart, some things can begin to happen to make this whole family a little more holy. Whenever I am about to finish my marriage preparation, I do this evaluation thing in comparing couples, their parents, the people that gave them the wedding instruction at the retreat and all, and I have them give them a 0 to 10 or 0 to -10, depending. And they establish where these people are in their life. And then I ask them, the last one, I'm giving all my treasure away here. The last question is, where do you put yourselves in this 0 to -10 or 0 to 10? And they have to pick a number. And I say, but after you pick the number, assuming it's not a 9 or 10, you're on the way there, I want to ask you, how would you get from, say, 3 or 4 to 9 or 10? What would you have to change? Not what you think they would have to change. What would you have to change in order to make this relationship better? And they always smile. Oh, wow. Now I say, we're going to verify it too, because after you say what you think you need to change, we'll see if your partner agrees with you. So they say something like, well, I have to quit being so negative and picky. I'm always picking and criticizing. And the other one smiles like, But it's a worthwhile exercise to say, what do I need to change? How can I contribute more to this relationship? I guess this is what the church hopes would happen on this day, that we would consider family. Consider what it means to be a part of one. Consider what we have to do to contribute to it. And if there is a need, and most likely there may be, what do I have to do to heal from my own experience of family? Am I going to carry the pain or the anger the rest of my life? Or might there be a way to forgive, to let go, to experience healing so that I can move on? As I always say to everybody, including myself, we're generational cycles, family, and 2, 3, 4 generations sometimes alive at the same time. And whatever happened to me, I can either repeat the cycle or change it. Those are the only two options. A lot of addictive behaviors in families are generational. Generation after generation, you just keep repeating it. Didn't learn anything from it. Others say, no more. No. I need to make a change, and I'm going to. Today, this Feast of Holy Family lifts all of this stuff and so much more. Even gives us Lady Bracknell and says, this is a complicated mess. Need some advice, some assistance. And hopefully today and this new year, that's exactly what we'll find. Whatever we need to make our families a little bit more holy, a little bit more whole.